Working with composition is about considering where your subject is in the frame, as well as where you are in relation to your subject. Moving around can completely change the compositional technique that you are using. Right now, this may seem like a rather bland image. It is using several techniques though. We have him right in the center. That can be used in a variety of ways. We also have a very symmetrical shot, right? And he is breaking this line here, which draws extra attention to him. I can move it over and quickly get rule of thirds. I also now have a lot of negative space in this area, which could be great for putting type if I want to use this with text. I could move this way some, and we could have a rule of thirds still, but now we have the line going diagonal, which is more dynamic. We have some contrast also with the bush, right? There's some color contrast. Of course, the whole time there's also contrast between his softness and the roughness of the pavement. If we move him, we could try putting him in the bush, right? Then you have a lot of contrast between like his shape, right? And the texture of the bush, the small leaves, the color, multiple forms of contrast there. He's also breaking up this repetitive pattern. So we've got pattern going on, we've got contrast. We could play with this a little bit as far as like, do we want to do rule of thirds? Do we want him to be centered? Do we want to do a close-up, right? We could bring it in to use the fill the frame technique. If we go somewhere else, let's see if we can find a way to do leading lines. If he was a bigger monkey, this would work better, but maybe you can kind of get the idea. If I kind of go like this, right, we have these diagonal lines, right, that are leading to him, right, and we also have this line here that's leading to him, and that one a little bit too, right? Maybe moving in a little bit closer might be better. Something kind of like that. That works a little bit better, right? We notice him a little bit more. And as you move around and you think about the size of your subject in the frame, that also changes the feel, right? When it's further away, what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on him? Or are you focusing on where he is in his surroundings? If we move up, what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the surroundings as much? Or are you focusing more on the details about him? Right? So when we get in close to our subject, it's more about them, right? Their feelings, their details, whatever. When we pull back, it's more about where are they in relation to the environment. So it changes our focus. I can move them over here. I'm still in the same area. I've just moved over a little to where the brick wall is. Now we have some interesting things here. The whole picture is essentially red or neutral tones, right? The grays. But there is contrast in the texture still. There's contrast in the saturation levels, right? He is very saturated in contrast to the darker bricks. We also have the repeating pattern of the bricks that he is disrupting. I could have him rule of thirds, which allows for some good text on the left. I could have it more centered, which keeps our eyes more focused on him, a little less movement of the eyes. I could pull back more. I could zoom in more. Right? These are all different ways that change the feeling of the photo. None of them are really necessarily best or worse, depending on how you use them and what you're using them with, and what you're trying to do with the photo. I found this little cicada shell here. I thought this could be interesting. You have some contrast, right, between the small cicada shell and the big monkey. You have some contrast between the man-made object and the natural object. You have the pattern of the fence that is being interrupted by both of them really, although more so him. We can also play a little bit with this difference in size, right, and with our centering. Do I want it to be centered? I don't think that's very good. I think it looks better if I move him off to the side, right? I can have this more centered and the larger monkey to the side. That creates a better balance. If you have multiple objects, the smaller thing being closer to the center where our eye naturally wants to go, the bigger thing being off to the side creates better balance. We also have this distracting background, right? So we might want to like reduce some of that complexity. So maybe if I bring my camera up, something like this, that might work a little better. That is less distraction in the background, which allows us to focus a little bit more on just the monkey and the cicada shell. I could also perhaps kind of go this way, maybe not. If I had a zoom lens, or maybe if I go back a little bit, low quality to digital zoom, but maybe you get the idea, right? This is also kind of interesting. I've got the ground out of the way. Now I have the pattern of the fence, But I also have the pattern of the siding, right? And then I have a lot of neutral tones between the cicada shell and the beiges in the background of the siding and also the ground. And then you have the bright red monkey. You also have contrast in darkness, right? So I might play with this a little bit and try to increase the exposure. I don't really like that. I think actually the foreground being darker and the monkey being darker, I think I actually like it better that way. So that's potentially an interesting shot too. My other thought is I could maybe try going the opposite direction from underneath, right? Which kind of plays with interesting angles. Although the tree may be a little distracting, I don't know, although I do kind of like it, but also add some color contrast, right? Because green and red are on opposite sides of the color wheel. So different things you can play with there. Although I do want to make sure that cicada doesn't get lost in the canopy of the tree. So maybe something like that. With these chairs here, I instantly thought this could also be a fun one to play with on composition. I don't really quite like this lighting here because the colors aren't as evident. So if I try moving him to a different one, I think it will work better. There we go. I like the contrast between him and the colors. I could do something with symmetry, right? And then he's breaking up all the patterns of the lines. I could also try doing something a little bit less symmetrical and still have some of those same effects, right? Where do I want him to be exactly? Do I want to show the other chairs in the shot too, which is sort of interesting? Maybe a little bit further down. You can play with some of these things to try to figure out what is a shot that you like. And keep in mind that the composition techniques are more of guidelines and not exactly rules. It's more about, does it feel like it meets the composition or the technique? Not so much about, is it 100% accurate? If it feels like it does, then it probably does. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. And most shots, most good shots, will utilize multiple compositional techniques.